okay, so sorry for everybody who's watching the recording, but I'm going to reach out to Renee, and looks like she's having trouble getting connected. One sec. Okay, just want to make sure she has any support she might need. All right. Hi, everyone here and future. First of all, you might notice there's a second me on the screen, and that's because I may opt to do a little drawing along with you as we go. So I'm Laura. I'm just going to tell on us, Tom. We've probably known each other since, I don't know, second grade. We grew up in the same town. We went to school together all through our years, and we weren't like BFFs in high school, but seeing each other at reunions and online and connected lots of times throughout all the years. And so it's really cool. You never know where you're gonna intersect in a meaningful way. So thank you, Tom, for thinking of me for this. And I love stepping into your world a little bit and seeing what support I can offer. Let's see. Hey, Renee, her audio is working. Hey, Renee, are you there? She's on mute. Just want to make a connection if we can real quick. She may not be in a place where she can talk. All right. So just a brief introduction. I have been a coach since 2006. Did my training and certification in 2006, 2007. Hold on, Renee is having some computer issues on her end. All right, Renee, if there's any support we can give you, please let me know. If it's at all possible to come on camera at some point, that would be amazing. We'd love to see you. So I've been coaching for 16 years this year, and that has also included some consulting, individual coaching, everything from, in the very beginning. Most coaches, when they get certified and trained, they'll like coach the cat if the cat walks by and looks like they want something they don't have. It's like, hey, Renee's going to drop off and come back on. So over the years, so it was kind of like doors wide open at the beginning of my coaching practice. And over the years, where I started to be drawn and people were drawn to me is in the space of leadership. My practice was always about leadership from the very beginning in terms of, hey, there's so much emphasis on leadership in the workplace. And my background is both corporate and entrepreneurial. I started 5 different businesses. I was in corporate for 10 years. And it's like, there's so much emphasis on leadership for business, but what about who we are in the rest of our lives? Like if we build these great muscles for leadership in an organizational context, but then our, relationships are falling apart or our health is poor or whatever outside of work. Like, well, the good news is we're not starting from scratch there. We've got a whole body of work we can like point to the rest of our lives and see if we can make a difference. And as time went by, I started getting more and more nonprofit leaders and business founders and mid-sized leaders and entrepreneurs and corporate leaders. Like the people started coming, and we just worked on all of it. Something that I will say, so today's conversation, and I really mean conversation. So Brianne, we might just have a really good time here together. Today's conversation is kind of an overview of over 16 years, the what I would call the non-negotiables of self and organizational leadership. And we'll see what they spark. And then also, assuming we have time, I want to just take a little bit of a deeper dive into one particular model, and I'll show you a book that I have used and probably recommended more than anything over all the years. So just to like kind of sprinkle you with what I have discovered and seen. And oh, by the way, any good coach worth their salt, Sarah, if you're watching this later, I know this is true for you too, is always in their own work. So anything I say here today is not like I'm preaching from the top of the mountain. That a lot of my training and background and grounding as a professional and a coach, and I've done a lot of leadership and organizational transformation work, team development, all the way from, like I said, founding members of startups to Fortune 50 CEOs in their C-suite. It's the piece that gets missed over and over is the human beingness of who we are as leaders and people together out in the world trying to do something together. whether that's you and your partner or spouse trying to have a life and build a family or have pets or whatever. Somehow things just go sideways with two people, much less in a team or an organization or business to business partnership or whatever. It's all the invisible stuff that seems to really take us out at our knees. And that there's a whole field of study called ontological coaching and consulting. And that's really the study of being. So everybody who's on the call or listening probably can relate to, walking into somebody's office and they have all the right books on the shelf that they've read about leadership and personal development, but somehow they're like the least inspiring person you would ever want to say, I'll follow you, right? Say all the right things, the words are on the page, but who they're being is just not something you want to be around. So that disconnect, that's where I work. I get up under the surface and all up in my client's business. And I always tell them I'm like the most caring, loving thorn in your side that you will ever have in your life. That's my goal. And my other goal is to work myself out of a job because I want them to learn and, fly free and be impactful. Just real quick, in my work world right now looks like a private practice. So I work with executives and leaders, and specifically working to focus in the space of climate and sustainability, trying to find those leaders who are just out on the front lines of trying to turn this Titanic that we're on and on our planet, and give them all the support I know how to give them so that their impact is amplified in a really powerful, good way. I also I do some contract work for a consulting and executive coaching firm I used to work for. I work through a friend's company who does very similar work, and I just wanted to give him a shout out. He wrote this book and published it last year, and he's got about 4 more books coming. It's the subtitle is, so it's Permission to Glow, a spiritual guide to epic leadership. So it's not coming from any particular spiritual grounding. It's kind of openly spiritual depending on the reader's preference. But what I appreciate about my friend Christopher Carter is that he's saying, look, if we're trying to leave who we are as spirit beings at the door, wow, are we just like leaving a huge source of wisdom and life and light and energy and possibility outside the gates of where we want to have impact. So I definitely wanted to share that. Okay, so now we're going to actually enter the space together by just taking a minute and centering ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to take off my glasses and invite you to close your eyes for a minute. I'm going to close mine so it's not weird. And just, the good old starting point, take a couple good deep breaths. And if you're listening to this recording, please do this as well. As you're taking those first intentional breaths, just notice that one of the first things that wants to happen is suddenly you're in your body. You can be aware of the floor under your feet and the seat under your rump. Notice wherever your hands are resting on, there's a contact point there. And just feel that point of contact. One thing I'd like to offer is, as you're noticing these points of contact under your feet, under your legs and rear end, and under your hands, you may have the back of a chair against your back, any of those points of contact can always serve to remind you that what you're in contact with came from the earth. The floor beneath what you're in contact with came from the earth. And if you follow it down in the building that you're in, next level down, through the architecture of that building, it all goes down and is supported by the earth. And in that way, we are never, ever not supported. We are always being held in this place that is our grounding for life. literally and figuratively. So if you ever feel unmoored, if you ever feel like the circumstances of the moment or the hour or the day are whipping you around, this is always a place to come back to. And that is good news. So just let your breaths keep deepening and almost sink further into that support. The other thing to notice is that our brains are the only part of our whole being that can either be in the past or be in the future. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's also a whole lot to access from being right here, right now. And when you attune to your breath and your body, the only place your breath and body knows how to be is right here, right now. And there's often clarity when we land in this moment. What you need, what you know, that truth that you're not saying that you need to say, even to yourself. So last thing is take a deep breath and just do a scan of your whole being from top to bottom. If there's any tight spots, just send some breath. And remind those bunched up spots that you've got a whole life to live, and this is just one moment. See if they can relax just a tiny bit into perspective. Whenever you're ready, take a breath all the way to your toes. And if you exhale, you can open your eyes and come on back. Hello again. I always feel like it's like, oh wait, this is now we can actually begin. So before we go any farther, just what do you notice? What's present for you now? If anything new.
I think for me, I'm hearing more than I normally would hear. I'm listening. I can hear the air conditioning is on right now. I can hear some other noises outside on the street. I hear some people talking. Of course, hear the car driving by. Just the common things, but I just notice them right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, my head's buzzing a little bit less, which is nice.
Yeah.
I always have so many thoughts, and so just kind of having a little bit of quiet mentally is a nice place to start.
Yeah. Thank you. I find that too. And it doesn't mean that those thoughts go anywhere or that they'll never come back. Or sometimes I think I resist slowing down because there's a part of me that's afraid that if I don't just keep the thoughts going, that suddenly they'll disperse and I'll never be able to get them back. And they're all, of course, so important. But somehow the ones that are meant to be back find their way. So thank you. And something that I practice in the midst of a very full and nutty life, just like everybody's, is, there are the moments, and there's like meditation practice, stillness practices, etc., that we stop and kind of make an event out of it, which, as for thousands of years, whole cultures have found deep value in that. And then it's kind of like the phrase of build the muscle before you need it. So you go to the gym. I find if I For example, if I keep myself well and fit, go to the gym, when I travel for work, I can lift my suitcase and pop it up into the overhead bin. And I'm always so grateful for like, oh, I'm so glad I just spent the last 6 months working on my upper body strength, right? Now I needed that. Same thing with a stillness practice, whatever that looks like. For some people, it's prayer. For some people, it's meditation. For some people, it's walking and leaving their technology in the car or at home, so they're present to their environment in a way that we rarely get these days. What I usually find, for example, in the practice of meditation, the whole job of meditation is not to suddenly magically have a clear mind. That's why people say, I tried it, but I stink at it. The job of meditation is to build the muscle of noticing when we've drifted and coming back, noticing when we've drifted and coming back. So you might be in your next meeting, a couple hours later, you've got a real commitment to what you want to produce in this meeting. Things start going sideways, or your thoughts get a hold of you, take you down a different track. Oh, all of a sudden you wake up to the fact that, wait a second, that's actually not where we need to be or how I wanted to lead this conversation. Let's come back and remind ourselves of the original intention of this conversation. So for a lot of leaders I work with, the idea of a stillness practice can seem a little woo, or, like, well, I belong to this certain religion and that doesn't match. And I'm like, I don't care what you do, create a space for silence where you can come back to presence, hang out there for a little while. Do whatever it takes to stay there. If it's prayer practice and you find yourself, thinking about the grocery list in the middle of your prayer, come on back to your prayer, whatever it takes. That's the muscle to build, for the sake of then being able to stay on track for what you're committed to causing in this life through your leadership. So with that, we've entered the territory of what I would say is almost the primary non-negotiable for the art of leadership. All those books on the shelf are the science of leadership. The human beingness is the art of leadership. So well-being would be the big bucket. For sure, some kind of stillness practice with some kind of regularity or consistency absolutely is on that list. And so the very first thing I would encourage you to take as seriously as you can. And I think in our human beingness, we have to come back to it and come back to it and come back to it, because that's how we do. So we get off track, we come back, we get off track, we come back. But it is such a broad category. And for a lot of us, a couple categories usually come up, whether it's sleep. I mean, we can't avoid the research on sleep. Any less than, like all the research shows, any less than 7 hours of sleep, we are just, the prefrontal cortex, which is our executive functioning, absolutely will be compromised, which for, again, leaders who are really committed to causing something through their leadership, it's an immediate undercut. And I'm someone who a very light sleeper. So I roll around in bed all through the night. I wake up, my cat walks across me, wakes me up. Like I sometimes don't fall back asleep. It is a discipline for me to actually make sure I'm in the bed for 8 hours, because I know I'm losing time. I'm losing sleep. That doesn't mean I'm sleeping 8 hours. I can't fool myself. I get about 7 hours of sleep if I'm in the bed for 8 hours. So anyway, sleep, take it seriously. Obviously, nutrition, hydration. The best thing someone told me that kicks my butt in the right direction with that, it was years and years and years ago. Someone said, if you were trying to grow a plant and you were really committed to this plant flourishing, and you need this plant to clear the oxygen in your space or whatever, brighten your day, would you ever, and this is not slamming this particular beverage, but would you ever pour a Coca-Cola into it and expect it to thrive? Ever? Of course not. But somehow, in the resilience of our bodies and modern medicine, we pummel ourselves. And I'm not innocent of that. But that is, these are the well, of course. But as one of my leadership mentors said one time, I know that it's not about what I know, because my life is not a match for what I know. I know that it's not a function of what I know because my life is not a match for what I know. Like, of course I know I should be eating more vegetables with less butter on them, or whatever it is. But is my life a match for that? Not always. So there's some deeper digging to do on that. And we'll get to that in just a minute. Also things like, of course, movement, proper hydration. Caffeine is not like, drinking caffeine all day is liquid going down our throats, but it's not actual hydration that our bodies need. Relationships falls under well-being to me. I see a lot of leaders who, go to work, try to have good impact. They've got responsibility for a lot of people. They interact with people. They have impact on the quality of the work life of many, many people in their employ. Tom, to your example from when we first started talking, but their relationships are falling apart outside of work, and they come to work stressed, and takes an energetic toll. Y'all know when you have stuff going on with people and it's not resolved, it's like always back here pulling on your attention and energy. And then suddenly they find themselves, snapping or being impatient or not staying focused, etc. So tend your relationships. It's hard, but man, is it worth it? And then whatever spiritual practices you have, or if that's a part of your life, absolutely don't just check the box. Make Sunday mornings worth it, or whatever day and time, right? All of this probably sounds like, yeah, okay. But this foundation of well-being is absolutely one of the number one things I see leaders not attending to, and we cannot underestimate the impact of that. That foundation under your feet no one can do that for you. Absolutely. So I'm going to shift a little bit, but before I do, anything sparking for either of you on that? Or what is sparking for you? What are you seeing for yourself? That's one thing. Like if there was one of those categories that you were like, oh yeah, I need to get back in some kind of practice with that.
Well, I think for me, maybe it's religion, prayer. I think also just relationships. I think right now I don't have too many. I'm focused on getting a broadia up and just. I do. I'm not a hermit, just to be clear. But it's not. I think not the number of relationships I had when I was younger. I suppose maybe, and that may be it. I think you're right. Because during this stressful time I had with that very difficult leader, I had friends outside of work I really could go to and vent sometimes, and they were a great support network. I think for me, that was immensely helpful. I think some people, when they are in difficult situations, they take the easy way out. Why don't we go get a few drinks? Alcohol really isn't the problem. I'm sorry, it's not the solution.
Yeah.
And it really is. It's a support network, relationships.
Connect.
And I do follow Buddhism a little bit, in the sense that I like to try at least one new thing every year, visit one new place every year.
Mhm.
And I think it's good to do that because in a way it just challenges you to grow a little bit, not maybe not spiritually, but intellectually, personally, to grow a little bit. So that is what I'm trying to do. I think for me, I think it's the relationship aspect is the part that really speaks to me. I think that's where I need to improve, really.
So I hear a couple of things there, Tom. One is connection, and one is, whenever we're in the conversation around whatever spiritual practice or activities we're up to, it's always about connecting to something bigger than ourselves. And, being able to source yourself from that, through that, whatever that looks like for you, that's the thing. Like for me, it's like life and nature and the life force energy on this planet that lives through every single human being here, and animal, and all of it. When I plug myself in without technology, that is an incredible source for me, and it reminds me who I am and what I want my life to be about. So yeah, how about for you, Brianne?
Yeah, a little different on my end. Mine's kind of anticipatory worry because I'm actually going to be a first-time parent soon, and so your comments about sleep are not encouraging to me. Because I know that it's going to be a really, really tough time for quite a while in terms of sleep, and I know very clearly how important sleep is, and so I'm just trying to anticipate attempting to navigate life
Yeah.
without having all of that power behind it and all of the executive function and good
Mhm.
brain activity that's needed to be fueled by proper sleep.
Yeah. Well, so thank you for bringing that up, because what I will say to that is, we all, this is another thing I see constantly and have to remind myself of, we all have so much more power than we know to shape our world and our life, and like Tom, I would say with that social piece, the connection piece, take the word try out of it. You can make a commitment to yourself. I could be your accountability partner, whatever, to have 3 different social events happen in the next 30 days. Make it happen. There's no try, right? Like, and then for you, Brianne, what I was just thinking when you were sharing that is like, okay, you can look and see, wow, there's going to be a window of my life where sleep is going to be kind of off the table for a little bit, like grab it in little bits and pieces, and all for the best reason ever, right? And so, you know, what can you set up to make sure you've got really easy, good access to nourishing food? Tap into your network. Like, what's all the support you can proactively set up? And like, if that thing pops up in your head about, yeah, but I don't want to burden anybody, or I don't know, that happens for a lot of people. They make assumptions about, oh, it's going to just be a bother. They don't have time. They're so busy or whatever. Stop with the stories. When people ask you like, hey, would you mind? It's like, of course, we love to support each other, but somehow I don't believe that it comes back the other way that way. So yeah, that's what you have the powerful ability to just do as much as you can. And then you're going to enter the tornado of new motherhood, and it's not going to be forever. Okay. So another really big non-negotiable for me and my clients, at least, is what I call creating anchors for ourselves. So all of us wound up the way we wound up through a lifetime of, from the time we were very, very little and first interacting with our environment, the people in our environment, this world and how it goes. And from the very earliest that our brains were able to, we've been making decisions about, how do I get through this thing? Like, how do I get through this thing called life and stay safe and be well and have it go okay and like be loved and in the tribe and not kicked out and all the very primal things, right? And whatever those coping mechanisms look like for each of us, very often there's at least a handful. And by the way, we're mostly blind to all of those. We just go through life the way life is, but we don't often know or remember that, for me, it is one way based on how I got shaped. For you, it's another way. For you, it's another way. But then we keep going, why are they reacting that way? It's like, well, because it's not that way for them, right? So very often there are at least a handful of those kind of ways we wound up being and ways we decided early on to automatically interact with life, that they worked as long as they did until they didn't. And so we bump into things like, man, I'm trying to have this thing happen through work usually, or whatever it is, but I keep feeling like I'm hitting a wall. Well, often it's because it's like that, what got you here won't get you there. The approach, those same old automatic approaches aren't going to work. And by the way, then the world just keeps spinning and often feels like churning us through the tumble cycle. Like stuff happens like pandemics and climate change and wars and all the rest. So we've got to have another place to come from in living in the circumstances we're in and causing what we want to cause through our leadership. When I say anchors, I'm talking about things like discerning and really diving deep into what it looks like to live from your deepest core values. Values, like you'll find values exercises all day long on the internet that are like, here's a list of 100 words, circle the ones that are your favorites, and ta-da, here are your values. Like, meh, big deal. That's going to last about an hour. There are tons of books. You can work with people, whatever, to really dive deep on. They're actually like the core elements that make you who you are. Like you can get down to a core list that it's like, if someone tried to take that out of you, we'd be like, wait, you just took that away. And now that's actually not Brianne anymore. Put it back, usually around like 5 to 8 to 10 core things. I've got mine. Actually, I have a friend former client who's an artist, and I had her draw up mine. So, like when things are crazy, I have these anchors. I know they are part of myself. I know that I always have them there waiting to be tapped, So if I'm in the midst of a challenging conversation with a business partner, I can stop and say, hang on. And this is where your stillness practice will come in to support you, because it's like, wait a second, hold on. Let's come back to center. How would I be approaching this if I was coming from wisdom? What would I be able to see in that person over there if I were coming from joy or growth or even peace? Like, what does that give me that I'm not going to get if I keep going down that same old worn path that's clearly not working? All I'm doing is saying the same thing louder. That's not working, right? So having a set of anchors within myself gives me a place to come from that typically is generative versus degenerative. So this is going to cause something new versus continue to degenerate whatever is happening. Anchors can also be a vision. It could be a vision for your life or your family or your leadership or your organization or the world. But pausing and actually, journaling or creating a beautiful piece of writing that maybe no one ever sees but you, that is like, this is what I'm going toward. And like, what are the pieces of that vision that I can tease back into now that can inform my next choice or that next conversation or how I say that hard thing? And then the third piece of creating anchors is articulating your commitments. It's a little bit different than vision. So I just got off the phone with a young leader over in Germany, and he has a regenerative agriculture startup that's just like taking off like wildfire, no pun intended. And he and his business partner are very, very, very different, which is awesome. They balance each other really well for their organization. But it also causes some conflict because they can just talk at each other and they're just not hearing each other. And so I asked this guy, like, what is your commitment to your business partner? Who are you committed to being for him in this thing that you're up to together? That, and they're very, like, they practice very, very inclusive leadership, lots of circles and dialogues with their staff, et cetera. And they're kind of balancing that with, and at the end of the day, they're the ones. This is all happening on their watch. And it really starts with the strength of how they're caring for themselves fundamentally, and then caring for that partnership. So it's a whole different world to stop and think, well, who am I committed to being for my partner that will have this really succeed and have my partner totally succeed here? I imagine for him, it'll be things like, I'm really committed to being someone for him that can say the really hard thing he needs to hear for the sake of the impact he has on our staff and what they can create in the space of conversation with him or whatever, things like that. Like, without pausing and really pushing himself to say, who am I committed to being for him? He's just going to keep probably acting the same way and hoping it makes a difference at one point or another, or having thoughts like, why doesn't this guy just get it? Right? So whatever it takes, and there are 1,000 trillion resources for values, vision, even around commitments like I'm talking about. whatever it takes. Those are, I have seen, make the most powerful difference, so that, you know, next time you enter that same old kind of situation that triggers you that same old way, and you try the same old thing and hope it works out differently, it gives you a whole different place to come from. And that will guaranteed cause something new to come through in the conversations or the circumstance. So I'm gonna pause there. What does that bring up? What questions do you have about that? This is the water I swim in every day, so I'm happy to field anything.
Well, you know, it's what I've been doing lately, I'd say over the last year, and you know this, you know Seneca Lake as well as anyone, is every day I walk after dinner for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, not by the lake, but on South Main Street, go by Hobart Williamson's campuses, I go to Houghton House, and I have my music on, and it's just nice to disconnect. And, you know, one thing I realized this spring, as when spring finally arrived here, was how many different shades of green there are in this world. And it sounds silly.
Yeah.
I look at, my God, look at all this green. And then I realized, you know, Tom, this is, you're not seeing this thing. I think this is what you're speaking to, Laura. It says, I step back and say, well, this really is amazing to see. But, you know, for me, it really is, I need that to, I've always liked walking. You just have to get away from it all, especially with the social media. You know, I was just telling Laura this, Brianna, for example, I mean, right now I've been working on my email, but also on my Twitter account. I'm just getting, dropping people who are just very angry or provocative. They want to try and instigate things. I said, look, this is not, I only joined Twitter for a broad purpose, not to get into political debates. You know, and I think it really is, you have to say, no, I just don't want this in my life. You need to focus on this. Going to what you're saying, Laura, about core values and how do you articulate the vision. That's my mission, or my vision, I'm sorry, is you just try to make this a better place, a better world in my own little way. And I think, Brianne, you think the same thing, I imagine, you know, through what we're doing through the student exchanges, international collaborations. But my big thing always is with my passion, sometimes like I overcommit. And I think that's where I get into that rut. So I think what you're saying is stepping back, you know, being in the present, I think is really, it's really important. So I've just been absorbing everything that you said like a sponge. I mean, it really does, it does resonate with me.
Yeah, thank you for all of that, Tom. So a couple thoughts. One is, knowing you, I would be so surprised if you don't have some kind of core value around either the power of perspective, or it probably goes back to your connection value, but there's something about creating space for differences. I mean, look at the business you started, right? Like, it's at the heart of that. So here's the easy part, is the articulation in a way. Like, I work through a whole process with my clients on that. It takes a little while. However, that's the easy part. The hard part is, first of all, what's happening in your own seat. Are you really diligently working to live from the inside out those values? And usually we're fumbling somehow with it, but we always, you know, the practice is diligence, rigor, you know, consistency, notice the impact. So you get the hit when it comes back to you, like, oh, wow, that made a difference, right? And then, like, look at your life. Is there alignment with, is it a match for who you're being out in the world also? You know, so even just like catching your thoughts on all those people harping back on Twitter, like, okay, well, they're doing what they're doing, you're doing what you're doing. It initially automatically occurs one way. And then if you can inform yourself by who you know you are, based on who you are at your deepest core, just start asking the question, what's another way I could see this? What's another way I could see this person? What else could be true about where they're coming from? Right? So that's the work of it. That's the tall, beautiful order we can give ourselves.
I have one observation, and I'll turn it over to Brianne so I don't dominate the conversation. This conversation actually took place between two of our classmates from high school. I won't mention them. But someone had put a video on Facebook. It was about this, an Asian man, just, I think it was a subway or train, something like that. And this other guy, an elderly old man, started just harassing him, yelling racial epithets at him for a good 5 minutes. And then and finally the Asian man said enough's enough, and he was going to defend himself. And then that's when all the people came and they stopped him. They didn't stop the person who was perpetrating this horrible abusive behavior. They stopped the person when he was defending himself. But what happened is our two classmates got involved, and one said, look, if I had my gun, I would have done something like that. And someone attacked him. I said, well, hold on for a minute. What's happening here is you both have the same values, right? What this person did to the Asian person was wrong. Where you're different is in your beliefs, right? He thought if I had a gun, I would have done this, whereas I wouldn't necessarily have used a gun, or neither would you. But you and this other person have more in common than you think. It's just a different way about doing it. You know, and I said, look, we're on the same side. Just don't become confused by the issue or how so-and-so is going to deal with that.
Mhm.
We have to, I think we have to go back to that. I think that's a good point that you're making, Laura.
Well, you're speaking to a nuance distinction between a position and a value, right? So one of the ways you can be interested in and kind of do some detective work on what your core values are. One way is to think about, where do you have a passionate position about something? You know, pro-gun, anti-gun, pro-life, you know, pro-choice, whatever. Or like how you think things should be, whatever, just grab a couple of them. And then it's like follow it down, because there's always a core value. Values are neutral. Positions are not. Values can give rise to positions. And so, Tom, to your point, two people standing next to each other can have very dramatically different positions on a subject. But if we trace it all the way down, they actually hold the same core value. It's just being expressed differently by how those two people got shaped in their environment and what they learned in life, et cetera, et cetera. So that's actually one way you can look and see what's underneath that position that actually informs me about something that may be one of my deepest held core values. And two tests for core value work. One is, kind of like I said to Brianna earlier, like if someone took that away from you, if we could magically like go in there and take it out, would you still be you? So there's some values that are a little bit higher level that it'd be like, oh yeah, if I had to, I could let that go. It would suck, but I would let it go. There are other ones that I'm like, oh, no, you cannot have that ever. Like that is part of who I am. So that's a test to see. And another test is, so for example, my core value of nature. If I look back over my whole entire life since I was conscious and aware, I can see how that value was expressing itself through me in all different kinds of ways, all different. And it might be different tomorrow, but it's the same through line of that deep core value informing my self-expression, my choice of activities and actions, and what I stand for, and some of my positions. It's that through line. So it's not like it stops or starts, or starts when you got this job that you have or started this business. It's actually, nope, that's actually not a core value. That's something else. Yeah. Brianne, how about for you? What came up for you in that little spate of talking I just did?
Yeah, I really enjoyed your use of the term anchors and about using those to return. I didn't quite know where you were going with them at first, but once I kind of understood your definition of them, because the anchors are used in a lot of different kind of ways. I really appreciate it. I'm someone who has a lot of talents and a lot of capacities and has worked in a lot of very diverse areas of work over the course of my professional and academic kind of careers. And that can be confusing sometimes because you're constantly kind of having to figure out who you are. Like I have a tendency to kind of chameleon into the work that I'm doing at present, and I sometimes can lose a bit of sense of self and just be so crafted around that work. But in general, I have realized as I look back, I'm able to kind of take these anchors and I apply them generally to each place. And it's sometimes hard to explain that as I'm maybe trying to pitch for being in a position that's different than the last one, or being in a discipline that's quite different than the last one. But my anchors, I think, are the ones that I can kind of, like you said, come back to, and they apply very well to everything that I end up kind of finding myself doing. Maybe not as obviously to folks outside of my own head and who know me very well.
Yeah.
But it's useful, and it's both good for reminding myself of who I am and the things that I am at core sort of capable of and naturally tending toward, but also to help others understand why I can contribute value to something.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you might find that if you took a little more time and just looked at that a little more closely of, see if you can, first of all, just get a draft list of your core values and then look back and say, well, how are they showing up here? How are they showing up in that next job? How are they showing up in that next experience? It may change your story about the chameleon. It may just become, oh, that was me in different forms of expression of the same through line of core self all the way along. That's all it was. I found in working with this for a long, long time that if we get to the kind of the real core of that articulation of who we are, sometimes those words evolve over time, but the core values that we know to be true about who we are don't tend to change. But absolutely, as we age and as we get into different circumstances of life and jobs and family constellations and all the rest, our self-expression of those values changes. And that's all it is the next evolution of expression of who you truly are. I've worked with people a lot who are in between jobs or wanting to take the next step. And once they've got those core values nailed, especially if they've got, a little bit of an analytical brain, but they love this exercise, which is we'll prioritize them. We do this whole prioritization process. And so we'll list them like 1 to 8 or 1 to 9 or whatever it is, priority order. And then across the top of the grid, it'll say, idea or job opportunity 1, opportunity 2, opportunity 3, and they go down. And the first thing they do is check the box. Like, this particular opportunity is going to really have me lit up in this one and this one and this one. First of all, initially that shows one thing immediately, which is like, maybe option 3, which seemed like it was lower on the list initially, actually would have them in fuller expression of their top 5 values. Who knew? And maybe that one that looked so attractive is actually only going to light up the lower ones or whatever. For all the check boxes, then they go in and they do a scale of 0 to 10. To what degree will this have you in expression through this value and be able to contribute through this value and really honor this value? So it's an information and data gathering exercise for the left brainers in the crowd that can be super informative. So for whatever that's worth, if that helps. Tom, I was going to go into this whole other thing, and obviously time has flown by. So what I will say, I'm happy to come back later another time if you want me to dig into this, but
Sure.
the number one book I have ever recommended, I mean, I've got a handful of them, but the number one book is this little, unassuming little book called The Power of TED. You ever heard of it, either of you? All right. You can read it in a weekend. It's like, let's see, I don't know, 150 pages. And the core of it is distinguishing between what it looks like to live or slide back into, in some cases, a way of relating to life from a victim orientation. There's a model called the drama triangle that was developed in the 50s by a psychologist named Stephen Karpman, Karpman. And it's really a very simple model of dysfunctional relationship. And this can be like relationship with another person, but it can also be how we relate to circumstances and events in our lives. Anything and everything can apply. And the key roles that are in place in that kind of an approach and an orientation. And newsflash, we all slip into it. Some of us live there a little more than others, but in any given human, in any given day, we'll have our little moments. And then, so this guy, David Emerald, took that whole model and was like, God, that is brilliant. But from a coaching perspective, what I want to know is, where do we go from there? Like, once we identify, like, oh, wow, I really try to rescue people all day long. And I had no idea that just like keeps them as much smaller than they probably can be in their life. Like, there's lots of dynamics on the drama triangle. So David Emerald said, where do we go from there? And he created a companion model that's called the empowerment dynamic. Very simple. Like these are like, I was going to have you draw them on a page. We could do it that fast and you'll be able to see something about, whoa, how can I, even in certain relationships or whatever, much less how I relate to all of life, come from a more empowered and empowering place. So I cannot recommend this enough. Again, it was referred to me by one of my very first leadership mentors years and years and years ago. And I promise if you read it, I mean, and it's like a fable, it's not high literature. If you're someone who loves really good literature, this is not it. But the story does illustrate the models very beautifully. So can't recommend it enough. Happy to come back or whatever, have a call and walk through it with you. That's what I got, Tom, for today. And you're on mute.
Still on mute. Yeah, thanks, Laura. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And thank you for that book. And the other one that you mentioned was Permission to Glow. Who's the author of that? You said Christopher Carter, right?
Christopher Carter. It's Christopher with a K,
Okay.
K-R-I-S-T-O-F-F-E-R.
Okay.
He's all over social media. He would be a bright spot in your social media experience. I don't think he's on Twitter, but he's on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. Yeah.
He's not missing much on Twitter, I can tell you that much.
I know. I jumped off that a long time ago.
Oh, I'm about to. I
You
mean,
both
really,
need to find better corners of Twitter to engage in,
I'm
because
sure
there are
there's-
places that are actually, you can kind of find your little light spot of people who are trying to do good and learn and share
Yeah.
things. So
Mine was like, I followed positive people, but the
Yeah.
volume and the pace of it was just
yeah.
so overwhelming for me.
Well, I signed up for the international education community, and they still get so political because what they do is that they'll comment on someone else's post and someone else comments.
Be a
And I
bright
get the
light,
feed.
Tom. But go be a bright light in there.
really sorry, I do have to
see.
go. But
So good to
Laura,
meet
thank
you.
you so much for
You're
your time
welcome.
today. I would love to connect with you in some other way. Maybe, are you on LinkedIn or anything like
I am.
that?
Yes.
Okay,
find me
I'll
on LinkedIn.
definitely follow you.
All right. Perfect.
Good.
Bye.
Thanks.